Good morning, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So we've got lots of great stuff to talk about today, as usual, and I'm going to start out with the stats. And this week we had a lower number of houses that sell, and January is our lowest month. And usually it comes from basically 30 days ago is when the houses are closing. And this is from January 18th to the 24th. So that would mean it was right before Christmas. So obviously people are busy with the holidays, not out there shopping for houses. And that's why the number is lower. So it's 279 houses that sold last week. And as a result of and the week before it was basically, I've got it right here, it was 337. So, down about 50 or so, in looking at what it was. But so as a result of that, it's showing that the months of inventory are at 6.78, which would mean that it's a buyer's market. And that may or may not be true. We just have to look at the trends and see what's going on after this week. And next week will kind of probably be about the same because it were properties that were going under contract between Christmas and New Year's. And then always in February, it kind of, speeds up and then we get back on track. But of those 279 properties, there were 38 of them that were under 250, 25 between 250 and 300. 26, 83 between 300 and 400, 46 between 400 and 500, 72 between 500 and a million, and 14 over a million. So when you look at that, then the median price is at $392,500, which is the first time that it has been below 400 in forever. And so again, something to see if that's a trend or what's going on and everything in regards to that. When we're looking at the numbers, that I just went through in regards to the different price points, that between 400 and 500, that price range is down quite a bit. And so as a result, the median price is, down quite a bit as well. So basically that's kind of what's probably going on, but we'll see next week what kind of is happening. So as I said, there's 6.78 months of inventory in regards to what it says. And under 250, there's only less than 3.87. Then we go to 4.71 from 250 to 300. We're at 4.8 from 300 to 400. And then, like I said, there's a lower number this week between 4 and 500. So we're at 8 months of inventory there. We're at 9 months of inventory between 500 and a million. And over a million, we're at 13.57. So the way this looks right here is that in the higher price ranges, anything over 400,000 is basically, more of a buyer's market than it is below 400,000. So again, like I say, probably almost every week, real estate is extremely local. So we're looking at the Orlando market, and the 4 counties that we're including here are Lake Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. And so as a result of that, we're looking at kind of the broad picture in regards to what's going on in our area. But really, if we were to look at your specific neighborhood, your specific subdivision, school district, zip code, all of that kind of stuff, when it really comes down to it, we might have a very different picture. And so it's really important to be very local in regards to what's going on in the real estate market, because when an appraiser comes in, they're only looking at everything that's within a mile of your property. And if they can get everything that's in your exact subdivision, then that's what they're going to go for. Because your subdivision, you might be gated. Another one across the street, they might also be gated. One might be man gated, the other one not, which man gated means that there's actually a man that lets you into the neighborhood. And there are different amenities that are included in that kind of stuff. So it really makes a big difference. I was looking at some property last week, and the house across the street was worth in a different neighborhood, was basically the difference in the price point was about 300,000 from one neighborhood to another. And so basically there is something that you definitely, and then you have to look at it further and go, wow, why would that be that much more? And so in looking at it and figuring it out is basically what I love to do and everything. But this is just a guide to give you an idea in regards to what's going on so you can know if you're on track or off track if you're out there looking at property. So the list to sale price is at 96.77 this week. 94.11 is under 250, and then also 250 to 300 is 94.62. So, and then on the higher end, over a million is at 95.23. And so those are kind of the outliers right now. So we're getting to the point where really that 250 to 300 is kind of like the under 250, kind of thing that those houses usually need work. And so as a result of that, there's a lower amount that people get those houses for than what the asking price is. And then over a million, because there's a lot of wheeling, dealing, and all of that kind of stuff going on, that basically, there's some room there too. So for example, when it comes to the, to the overall final list price and what it sold for, on the over a million, they were listed at 1.587, and the median price that sold was 1.222. The average price was 1.512. So that's a difference of 66,000. So that's why it comes out to that 95%. Basically that came off of there. Now, the average days on the market is 73 right now when it comes to single-family homes, so that's kind of what's going on there. So we also look at condos, townhomes, and villas, and there were 77 that sold last week from 89 the week before, and that price is at 270,000. So that's basically the difference in price is 392 versus 270 from the condos, townhomes, and villas. And one thing I didn't talk about is the inventory increased by 88. For the single family homes, condo, town homes, and villas, that increased by 68 and takes us up to 4,000. So we only had, like I said last week, a total of 77 condos, townhomes, and villas that sold and 4,000 on inventory. So breaking down those condos, townhomes, and villas, like I said, there were 77 of them. 30 of them were under 250, 15 between 250 and 300, 24 between 3 and 400, 5 between 400 and 500, 3 between 500 and a million, and over a million, there weren't any that sold, but there are 24 on the market. So when you're looking at months of inventory here in the condo, townhome, and villas, we're looking at 12.55. And usually it's not quite that high, but it's a lot higher than the single family homes right now. So under 250, we're looking at that 12.76. We've got 10 months of inventory between 250 and 400. And then 400 to 500, we go to 23 and a half months. And then 500 to a million, we go to 20.92 months. And then, they can't calculate it over a million because there wasn't anything sold. The list to ask price ratio is at 96.23. Very much mirrors the single family homes in regards to what that's going on. And average days on market is 91. So basically, when it comes down to it and you're looking at this, and this is just kind of an interesting phenomena, in my opinion, when you're looking at the $400,000 to $500,000 condo, townhomes, and villas, there were only 5 of them that sold with 510 on the market. So you got to understand that's 1 week versus looking at months. So, really it would be 20 divided by 510, roughly. So 2 years of inventory almost. and 20 months, 21 months when it comes to the 500 to a million. So you can see that when you're pricing your properties, especially in that category, that you have to be very aggressive, because if there's only 5 that sold and there were 510 to look at, if you're not something that stands out to people, they're definitely not going to go look at it. I think that's a very easy way for people to see that it definitely makes a difference in regards to what you're doing. And you can say, well, I'm just going to price it and they'll come and look at it. If there's only 5 people that bought and 500 on the market, and they're only looking at 10, the chances are, and that might be on a good day, that they're not going to see your property if you don't have it priced properly or marketed properly. So it's very important that you do that in this market. And I think it's very evident to see that, from these stats this week. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and I will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. To discuss the sale of your home, you can call 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I saw an interesting article this week, and I know some people that did this, and basically it is one of the trends that took place during the pandemic, that if you did this, that it says that you might want to change it back in your home before you sell. And basically what that is it's taking one of the walk-in closets in usually the primary bedroom and making that into an office. So that's something that during the pandemic, everybody needed their own space and everything like that. And I remember selling homes to people that's what they said they were going to do, because they needed, office space for multiple people in the home. And so they said there were 2 huge walk-in closets in the primary bedroom. And so they said they were going to make one of them into the office, and it's worked great. But before you sell that home, it might make sense to actually turn it back into a closet, because people prefer storage than an office for the most part when it comes to that, to that primary bedroom master closet. I call it master primary. They've changed the name of it, so sometimes I still go back and forth, but basically when it comes down to it, that is one of the primary things that a lot of people look at. They're always looking at closets. Here in Florida, we do not have basements or anything like that, so people are looking for, where can I store things, and they want to have it so that they can store as much stuff as possible, and closets is kind of where it's at, what they really want to see, do, all of those good things. And so if you did do that and you're thinking of selling, that might be something that you want to consider before you sell. The other thing that I saw an article that I thought was interesting but not surprising is the roof. And basically it's like, if you have a new or newer roof, that is very important, and it is something that a lot of people consider. So they're always asking, that is one of the things that is always asked, is how new is the roof? And there are a couple of reasons why it's very critical and important to ask that question. Is one of the main reasons is just insurance alone. If you do not have, if you don't have a newer roof, say it's 20 or 30 years old or something like that, the new homeowner is going to have a hard time getting insurance. They can do that 4-point inspection and everything, but if that inspector says that the roof has less than 5 years on it, then there's no way for the that a lot of insurance companies are actually going to insure that property. So they're going to require that a new roof is done. And so when, homeowners do that, or potential buyers, they're just looking at dollar signs, and they've already come up with a lot of money for the down payment, excuse me, and all of those kinds of things. So they're like going, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with a new roof. And so we actually have companies that will come in and they'll put the roof on there for you, and they will get paid at closing if that's something that you want to do if you're running into that situation. And that's what I definitely recommend for people that are in that situation where your roof is old, that you might want to go ahead and do that. And so basically, the bottom line is that when you're looking at putting your house on the market, you want to put your best foot forward. As I just mentioned in the last segment, that if you're in a condo, townhome, or villa, the inventory is so large that you definitely need to stand out. And so as a result of that, you've got to, you don't want to have that situation, going on. If you're in a condo, it's outside of your control. They're still going to look at it, and then they're going to think, oh, we're going to have a special assessment if something hasn't been done. So when you're considering and looking at putting your property on the market, you just have to look at it through a new lens, really, and look at it from the buyer's end. I mean, it's really interesting because when you actually look at your house through another lens, you go, this is in great condition, or you go, oh, well, I could have done a couple of things and made it look a little better. And when it comes down to it, if you've got items that are needing repair, or somebody looks at it and goes, oh, that needs some work, what happens is that in people's minds, they go, okay, this is what I can see. What can I not see? And so as a result of that, they automatically go to, okay, I'm going to lower the price in regards to what I think this house is worth because of that particular situation. And that's what you don't want, right? Is that you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Now, there are some ways that you can combat that, and we do that, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that if you don't have the cash flow or the money or even the, looking at it. And you have to understand that everybody's busy. Everybody has a lot of stuff going on. And if you've got a project that you need to do on your home that you feel would make a difference, first of all, the best thing for you to do is to talk to a professional, obviously like myself, that I can go in there and say, yes, that's going to make a difference, or no, it's not. So you don't want to be obviously spending money that you don't need to, but at the same time, you do want to spend the money that you do need to. And then you go, wow, that's a big project. I don't have time to take that on. So the other opportunity that we have is that we do have people that we work with, that they have a project manager that they actually take on the whole project. And so you don't have to. So we sit down, we go through exactly what the best thing is to have happen. And then they kind of take over the project after that. And like I said, they get paid at closing. So roofs is one thing that they would do, but there are other things that they might do as well to help you out. And so basically you don't have to be involved in doing that. When you're living your life and you're doing things and there are different projects that you want to do, it's interesting. I talk to people all the time and they say, oh, that was something that I was going to do, and can you just give me a couple of weeks to get it done? And then 9 times out of 10 they do take those 2 weeks, but when you come back, they didn't get those things done. And it's not that they didn't want to, or it wasn't a priority. It was just that there were other things that were in the way and they hadn't gotten to it. And so sometimes we need help. And so it's just better to get somebody else in there that can actually do it, that's not going to, gouge you or anything like that. It's going to be a fair price, but it's going to make it up on the other side, that you're going to see that you're going to get a lot more money for your house. And that's going to be a huge thing, for you in regards to moving on. And if you don't want to fix anything up because you're like, hey, I would rather just sell it, be done with it, not have to mess with it, I don't want any project managers, I don't want anything like that, then that's fine as well. We do have options for that as well. And that actually comes into play with our cash offer platform, that we actually can go ahead and get usually between 10 and 14 cash offers on your home without you even putting it on the market. And so basically that is a great thing for a lot of people that don't want to go through the hassle. They just want the certainty that my house is sold right now. And there are fees that these companies have, usually in the neighborhood of about 5% or so. And so basically what happens is that they're going to take their 5% or whatever. They put the rest of the money in your pocket. For the most part, there's different companies that have different plans in regards to what they do, but it's no different really than when you're buying a car. If you go to a dealer and you don't want the hassle of selling your old car, you go ahead and you turn it into the dealer. Now, when you do that, you know that you're going to take maybe a 5 or 10% cut in regards to what you're going to get on that car, but for the convenience, not having to deal with the transferring the the title and not having to deal with the sales tax and all of those kinds of things, you say, yeah, it's a lot better for me to just drive my car into the dealer and drive out with the new car instead of, how am I going to get that second car home and all of those kinds of things that, go into play when you're doing all of that. And it's not any different today in a house. You do have those options that you can absolutely do that. And we definitely there are other people out there that offer cash, that they are going to bring you a cash offer, but we bring cash offers. We have multiple investors that basically, do this for a living. So it's very, that you can count on it. We actually on our platform can put local investors in there as well. So if that house is in an area that they're looking for property and that kind of stuff, that they can go ahead and do that and everything as well. I was speaking to a gentleman a week ago, and he was in another part of the country, but basically, he's a realtor and he's looking at his family business is basically that they do buy real estate, but they buy and hold it. And so they're looking for rental investment properties. So I said, well, this would be perfect. You can actually put your company, your family business, on our cash offer platform. So when a house comes in that matches it, that your offer would be there competing with everybody else's, and they would at least know about you, which they don't obviously do that with everybody. And so he thought that that was a great option and, kind of next on his list to get done. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So there was an article that came out this week that was actually talking about a company, and it's actually called Arrive Home is the name of the company. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that they are headquartered in Salt Lake City, and they actually have launched a new program, down payment assistance, designed to accommodate borrowers purchasing manufactured homes. Now, this means that these are properties that are actually on real estate that you own. And so I do know that, if you are in a park and you want to, those are kind of the least expensive properties that are out there now that they're in a park, but basically it's not a real estate transaction. It is, kind of like an auto transaction when you're buying those that are in a park, that you're paying lot rent because you don't own the land that your trailer or whatever is on. But these are for single wides and double wides where you actually own the land. And so they can actually help you with the 3.5% down, and then you would get, and it goes along with the 30-year FHA loan, and basically that it has a 1% fixed interest rate, below the first mortgage. So, it's an option for people that are kind of tight on cash and can afford the payments and everything like that, that is available. So the name of the company that does that is called Arrive Home, and they're in Salt Lake City. So that might be something that, if that's what you're looking for, that you might want to, check out and everything like that. But basically, when it comes down to it, one of the key things that comes into effect for everybody that's out there, either buying or selling property, if somebody is getting a loan on the property that you're buying, or if you're the buyer and you're getting a loan, one of the things that always comes into play is the appraisal. And the thing that everybody needs to remember and look at is that the appraisal is basically an educated opinion by the appraiser that's doing the appraisal. And basically, when it comes down to it, the bank is relying on that appraisal to know that their money is going to be protected. You as the buyer and the seller, you are looking at the market together, and you're coming to a meeting of the minds to determine that this is the price that the buyer wants to pay, and this is the price that the seller is willing to accept. So everybody thinks, hey, this should just be great. And for the most part, it really should be. But the situation that happens is that banks go in there and they actually want to make sure that they're going to protect their investment. So if you're putting 20% down, then they want to make sure that the value is definitely so that their 80% is, accurate in regards to what they're doing. So as a result of that, there is the appraisal that the buyer pays for, but is really for the bank's benefit when it comes down to it. And in this kind of market that we're in right now, where everything has been pretty stable for the last several years, and ever since the interest rates went up, which is probably like 3 years ago or so. And so basically, as a result of that, when you're looking at it, it should be fairly consistent. We don't find a lot of appraisal problems, but the problem does come in with the outliers when there's something significant or special about the home that you're buying, or if there's something special or significant about the comparable properties that they're comparing that house to. So in a lot of our neighborhoods in Central Florida, anything that was built basically after 1980, for the most part, are in subdivisions, and they all have homeowners associations. When you're talking to somebody that's coming from another area, the first thing that they say, I don't want a homeowners association. And you're kind of thinking, but I want a new home. And you're like, going, well, good luck. Are you planning on building your own home that you don't want to have in a homeowners association? Because anything that you build by a production builder is going to be in a homeowners association more than likely. And so if you've got a custom builder, you're going to do something like that, you've got a lot more opportunity. But if you're going to buy something in a neighborhood, it's going to be tough to not find a homeowners association. So in those production builder communities, which we've got a boatload of them here in Central Florida, they might have had, 3 or 4, 10 or 15 different floor plans, but that was what they had. They had X amount of floor plans. They've got different fronts of every floor plan. So if they have 6 different floor plans and then they have, 3 different fronts or 4 different fronts, let's go with 4 on each of the properties. So that's 4 times 6, that's 24 different looking houses as you're driving through the community. Well, say there's 400 of those houses or 1,000 houses in that community. Basically, they're all one of 24 of them. And so when you're looking at the comparable properties, it was built by the same builder. It was built at the same time. It's got the same floor plan. It might have a different elevation, is what they call the look of the front. But basically, it's the same house. So it makes it very difficult for an appraiser to say that your home that you're buying is worth $50,000 more than the $400,000 house that sold next door that's the exact same floor plan. And so that's where we run into situations and problems and all of that kind of stuff that we're looking at. So what they're trying to do now is to have the realtors communicate if there is something special with that particular house that you've done that would make it stand out or worth more money. So when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, well, we completely gutted the whole house. We put in new kitchen, new bathroom, new wiring, new plumbing, new AC, new hot water heater, new roof, new everything. Well, then that house should be worth more. And so those things need to be communicated, to the appraiser. Now, is it going to be worth the amount of everything that you put into it? No, it's not. There are studies and all of those kinds of things that go into, if you spend, a dollar in a kitchen, that it's worth like 50 cents. And I'll actually have that for the next segment. But basically, when it comes down to it, the appraiser might give an extra 10 or 20,000 for something, but they're not going to give you 100,000, for all of those things that you upgraded and everything in it. And I think that that's one of the hardest things for homeowners, sellers to wrap their heads around. That they look at it and they're like, well, my house is so much better. And so for condition, you might get a little bit more, but you're not going to get significantly more. And because you painted on the inside or painted the outside or something like that. So it really is important that you're looking at the whole big picture in regards to, what's going on there. But they are opening the door so that those kinds of things can be discussed and all of that prior to the appraiser making their opinion. And so I was talking to another realtor earlier this week, and she was telling me that basically, that she had an appraisal on the house that she was selling, and they were asking her. The appraiser was actually asking her a lot of questions and having her upload comps and give all the details and all of that kind of good stuff, which. It was done through a portal, so it wasn't anything that could be manipulated or anything like that. But it's on this vein of making sure that everything is done right the first time. Because once that appraisal is done, there's not a lot that you can do. You can fight that appraisal, and I've successfully done that many times. But you have to show where the appraiser made a mistake. And as you know, if you don't cut down people's work, but you actually make it so that they understand and all of that kind of good stuff in regards to what's going on. It makes a big difference. For example, I had a property that was on the market, and it actually had in the backyard it had a huge outbuilding. It wasn't, another dwelling unit, an ADU, but it was, like a huge storage thing, and it had air conditioning in it, workshop, man cave, woman's cave, whatever, it could be used for a multitude of uses. And so that was valuable for at least some money. I think it was about 5,000, and it was a fairly big unit. It wasn't like one of those that you buy and put there. It was something that was actually built and quite substantial. So in the appraisal, there was another property that was showing, and what they showed on that, and the appraiser had said that one had an outbuilding like this one did. And so, and it had sold for a little bit less. And so it was taking down the value of the property that I had under contract. And so, the interesting thing is that I was looking at it and figuring it out. And, the appraiser had taken the pictures from the multiple listing service and looked at it and seen a shed in the backyard is basically what it was of this particular house is what they thought. But on further review, that shed was actually in the neighbor's yard behind that house. And what the picture was of was an old-fashioned clothesline that you could hang your clothes outside, which is one I can remember, which I'm going to date myself, but it was square and it had like, 5 or 6 or up to 10, clotheslines on it, and you twirled it around and stuff like that. And that was what the picture was of, not of the shed. But the appraiser, when they were looking at it, that's what they saw, is they saw the shed in the yard behind it, not realizing it wasn't that property's. And so as a result of that, I obviously got the value of the home to go up to where it needed to go and everything like that. And that was an honest mistake that had been made by the appraiser. They were, trying to find like properties that had sheds in the backyard. And, like I said, it wasn't anything close to what it was in this house, but basically it was something that they could point to and say, oh, well, this house had it too. And so that, brought down the value of the house that I was selling because, with that, it didn't sell for quite as much money. But when I was able to point that out, we got the appraisal to change. So you've got to have something like that you find that is an honest mistake that the appraiser made that allows them to keep, to save face, if you will, and that kind of thing, that doesn't make them wrong, but just as something that they misinterpreted or something like that. And it's not easy to do. It can be done. So now that kind of the gateway has opened up, that there is the opportunity to let them know, hey, this one has a new roof. They spent all this money, doing this, and the value and everything is there, and it does make it different than all the other properties that are out there. So I think that's a great thing that's happening out there. And so it's like basically the bottom line is that nobody wants to make anything so that it's detrimental. They just want to make it fair is basically what it comes down to. But, appraisals are kind of tricky. And when we're looking at this market, they're coming in a lot more to the prices and everything like that because the prices have been static for a while. But when you're in a market that's falling, the appraisers are kind of conservative, saying, oh, the market's falling. And so we've got to anticipate that the market's going to continue to fall. And when the market's increasing, they don't do the opposite and say, hey, we think the market's increasing. They're going on historical data, which is what happened, 30 days ago, 60 days ago, whatever. And I'll never forget having a conversation with a realtor on a property that I had listed. And he was telling me that, the appraisal was the be all and the end all, and that's what people had to pay. And I said, we're in a rising market here. And I said that, basically the bottom line is that the appraisal probably is not going to come in at what the property is going to sell for. It's going to be lower. And so what it's going to take is that for this particular seller is they want to get the most money from out of their property. And so when we're taking offers, we're asking people how much above the appraisal you're willing to pay, because basically we knew that the appraisal was going to come in lower than what all of our offers were. And we had 15 offers. And so basically that guy said, well, my buyer's not willing to pay any more than the appraisal because that's the value of the house. And I said, well, I disagree because I've got all these offers that people are going to spend a lot more on it. And so anyway, I said, well, that's unfortunate for your buyer, because I said your buyer's not going to get the house because we have many offers that are much higher and that are actually saying that they're going to go above the appraised price. And sure enough, the house sold for $20,000 more than the appraised price. That money went into the seller's pocket. The market was increasing, and so it was absolutely the right thing to do for the seller. And I look at it that agent, in my opinion, did a disservice to their customer, because their customer needed to be educated to know that at that point in time, that's what you needed to do. That's not what you need to do today. And that's why it's so important to know what the market is and what's going on and all of that kind of stuff, which is part of the reason why I give the stats every week to kind of give us a thermometer reading in regards to what's going on. And so we know kind of what's happening. Like I said at the beginning of the show, that the median price this week is for a single family home is at 392, which it has not been that way forever, but there were not as many houses selling on the high end side. And so we'll just have to see what next week brings, but we're at a very low number that sold this week, so I'm not concerned about it at all. But basically, in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.